today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about how to get past I'm sorry to actually repairing the problem. If a person's feeling hurt, angry, sad, some form of trust has been broken. And typically this happens when people get off course, either in themselves, in their marriage, or in their work, or all of the above. Apologies are an acknowledgement that a misstep has been made, but in and of themselves, even with the most sincere apology, you see not actually straightening whatever is crooked inside of us. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about repair is a skill, not a sentiment. And really, what that means is saying I'm sorry is a start, but it's not going to fix the problem. Real honors that some form of trust has been broken, right? If a person's feeling hurt, angry, sad, some form of trust has been broken. And typically this happens when people get off course, either in themselves, in their marriage, or in their work, or all of the above. A listener writes, when we hurt each other, we usually end up apologizing. Sometimes it feels sincere, but other times it just feels like we're saying the words so we can move on. And then the same issue happens again. What does real repair actually look like? And even when an apology is sincere, listener, Joseph, that is not going to fix the problem. And the problem is this, that feelings occur to inform us of where we are in terms of our sense of personal fulfillment and growth. Individually, marital fulfillment and growth for us as a couple, family fulfillment and growth for us and our family, work fulfillment and growth. Feelings come to inform us on, are we on track or are we off track? When we're feeling challenged but joyful, we're on track. When we're feeling challenged and upset, we're off track. Feelings guide us. They're really important. And the purpose of emotions is to inform us that we need to learn something. Maybe we need to learn that what we're doing is working. Maybe what we need to learn is not working so well. We need to find a new path. Apologies are an acknowledgement that a misstep has been made, but in and of themselves, they are inadequate to straightening what is crooked, let's call it. Particularly when even an authentic apology leads to the same misstep. We see this a great deal in domestic violence. There will be one partner who is physically abusive, or maybe just emotionally abusive. Let's just be clear. Sometimes you can be emotionally violent without actually laying a hand on someone. Been there, done that. Experienced it and delivered it. We all have. That kind of emotional violence is often followed by, oh, I am so sorry. Can you please forgive me? I'll never do it again. I will honor you forever and ever. And then somehow you end up stepping in it again. Even with the most sincere apology, you see not actually straightening whatever is crooked inside of us. Not actually learning the lesson leads to repeats of the same misstep. And as we said in the last episode, these things start out small and they get bigger and bigger. Emotional violence will eventually lead to physical violence. Physical violence will lead to death. And actually, if you're experiencing domestic violence or physical violence or even emotional violence, I want you to know that we're going to include in this episode access to the domestic violence hotline because you need help that we can't give you here. All right, that's if you're in that situation, Rich in Relationship cannot help you. Yeah, but they can. All right, so coming back to those of us who are not yet in that space, and I want you to know that any relationship can go to that place. Right? We are all capable of that. Don't sit here and judge, oh my God, that poor person, they're in a domestic violence situation. You could easily become them if you don't address, if you don't learn, if you don't grow, or your partner doesn't address or doesn't learn and doesn't grow. The hope, of course, is that we want to learn how to repair relational damage in ways that rebuild trust and emotional safety, right? Because intimacy occurs in vulnerability, and we can only be vulnerable when we feel safe and when we trust. And we can't feel safe and trust unless breaches of trust are addressed, repaired, and remediated. And couples who work together, they have the opportunity for this to happen on two fronts, not just at home, but at work also. And sometimes they work home with them and they rehash the breach of trust, right? The rest of us who go to work on our own without our partners, we experience a breach of trust at work. We go home and we can just let it go. But if you're married to the person you're working with, this can compound things. It's double trouble for folks who are working together and living together. Well, we've had lots of clients who have had this problem, and we're going to call one client Brad and the other one Gwen. And for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that Brad and Gwen are code words for this is something we've worked with, but we don't want to name these people. And you know that sometimes when we describe a situation, actually all the time we would describe a situation, it's never one person's situation. So we do not break trust with our clients. And if you're a client listening to this, and this happens to be a situation that you experienced and worked on with us, know that I am not thinking of you specifically. I'm thinking of the many clients who have had this experience. Brad, to get back to the point, had missed an important commitment that Gwen was counting on. And it was not catastrophic, but it mattered to Gwen. He had, I joked about this last episode, consistently missed date night with Gwen. Now, and he had reasons. I had a deadline that had to be made. And Gwen was working with him, so she knew he had a deadline, but still, she thought there's got to be some way we can preserve date night, and Brad apologized immediately, just like he had before. He said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for that to happen." But guess what? Because it had happened before, and he had apologized before, Gwen did not feel better. And she said to him, "I know you mean it, but this keeps happening." And Brad was, guess what? Frustrated, because he really wanted to have date night. He believed he'd done the right thing. He'd apologized. He'd owned his mistake. But Gwen had dismissed it this time because it was starting to feel hollow and empty to her. The problem wasn't the apology. The problem wasn't even that Brad acknowledged that he was unhappy about this too. The problem was that it wasn't being taken care of, and he assumed the apology should take care of it, should take care of the problem, when Gwen wanted the problem itself. She wanted date night back. She wanted some time with Brad. And it didn't seem like much to him, but to Gwen, quality time is her love language. So she felt like she was being neglected. Even though Brad tried to show that he loved her, he said when he apologized, he brought her some flowers. She said, "I'm so sorry. I dropped the ball on date night tonight. I got stuck at the job while you were, taking care of the kids tonight. I'm so sorry. Here's some flowers." But that didn't matter to her because gifts are not her love language. Quality time. The only thing that would replace date night is date night, and Brad didn't realize this. There was a pattern happening here. Hurt, apology, temporary calm, repeat. And so the breaches of trust, it was the same breach of trust over and over, but the pain was growing. So when Gwen brought this up with Brad at Rich in Relationship, first, we helped them identify their love languages. And it turns out that even though Brad likes gifts, Gwen not so much. That Gwen really needs the quality time. And it turns out that Brad really did know that he couldn't keep doing the same thing over and over and create different results, but he kept hoping that the situation at work was going to change, but it didn't, because you see, their own success had come to bite them on the tuchus. Things were getting busier and busier, and what Brad needed to do to preserve date night was hire someone else, because it was too much for Brad and Gwen to do. And the steps for this realization, this aha moment to happen were A, they needed to acknowledge and name what happened and why it mattered. They each needed to own their part in it. Like Gwen needed to own the fact that she had accepted, "I'm sorry," the first 3 times, when really what she should have done the first time was say, "How do I know this isn't going to happen next week?" Or when can we reschedule date night so it works? Or any other strategy that would have made it happen. And Brad had to own that he was hoping that he was going to get less busy when really his purpose at work is to grow the business. And so it was interrupting his purpose in his marriage, which is to grow his connection. There was a recognition of the impact Brad recognized that he had competing purposes, competing values, and that in order to keep both values and sustain them, some change was going to happen, and then he initiated the change. And Gwen recognized that by keeping quiet and allowing Brad to be on his own hamster wheel, she was not supporting him the way she had committed to support him. Right? Her commitment to Brad was, I want you to be your best self. But by allowing him to be on the hamster wheel, she was not allowing him to be his best self. She did him a disservice by not calling it out with more force earlier, before she got really angry. So Brad hired the extra help. That took actually a little more time. But Gwen understood that it was going to take a little more time because she knew that when there's a new hire, it takes more energy to train them. And Gwen, since they're working together, helped train this person. They moved date night to a date breakfast on the weekend for a little while this transition was going on, so she could get her quality time and they could both step in and train this person. They both practiced communicating disappointments and looking for solutions earlier in the process. So instead of saying that's okay and pushing it off, they asked, hey, how likely is this to happen again? And over time, their conversations went from defending the past to designing a different step. They learned lessons from the emotions. And quite honestly, Gwen felt she had an issue with abandonment because of the way she grew up. Her parents were not present for her the way they could have been. In fact, her father was very angry and abusive with her. He was physically violent with her as a child and as a teenager. And so she was very easily went to feeling unsafe in relationships. And so Gwen did a breakthrough session, is what we call it here, Rich in Relationship, which is a deep dive into releasing old emotions and old behaviors in a way that isn't re-experiencing the feelings though, right? The beauty of the breakthrough session is it's a semi-hypnotic, self-hypnotic process where you recognize the old emotion, learn the lesson, let it go, and move on. And it's a very systematic neuro-linguistic programming technique, which I learned at the feet of the master, Dr. Matt from Empowerment Incorporated. And if you're interested in this technique, we can help you with pretty much anything you're stuck in, help you to succeed and move forward. Because if you're working together and you're married, getting stuck is a double whammy. You need to get unstuck really fast because in order to remain financially solvent, successful, and thriving, both emotionally and financially, it's really important to have clear communication and clear understanding. And this is a way to get there quickly. Most couples confuse remorse with repair. I'm sorry with repair. It's not the same. Repair means learning the lesson. Repair means letting go of the emotion. Repair means applying the lesson to the situation. Repair means mutual understanding. Repair means working together. Repair is structural. Remorse is emotional. Repair restores three things: shared acknowledgement of reality, emotional understanding of one another, and confidence in one another that in the future, trust is restored and maintained. Repair requires slowing down enough to understand the injury, not just move past it, right? Just like Gwen took the time, she slowed down and took the time to do this intensive work. We did this work in one day, by the way, one intensive day. She was able to let go of her concerns about abandonment and know that she was whole and complete in herself. And that Brad's actions, and know, I'm going to do that again, Renz. She was able to know that she was whole and complete in herself and know that those were Brad's actions. And that all she needed to do is express how his actions were impacting her, that she didn't need to have a deep, intense reaction of, oh my God, you're abandoning me anymore. She didn't need to do that because she had learned that lesson. That the abandonment was not about who she is. That was her lesson. Big 10,000-foot lesson. And this is the whole deal, folks. When we learn to pull lessons out of emotional situations, that's when we grow and develop and move forward and step into our purpose in life. So as a result of this, instead of immediately saying sorry, when a misstep was taken, they clarified what actually happened. As a result of this, the partner who was hurt explained how the event affected them emotionally and practically. In this case, Gwen said, hey, it's bringing up a lot of old emotions, and that was the opportunity for us to address that. But sometimes it isn't that. Sometimes it's like, I just feel hurt, and that can be enough. It's enough to simply feel hurt. They identified the pattern. She identified patterns in her life. He identified patterns in his life. They designed a change. They adjusted their system. They made clearer commitments. They adjusted their agreement to adjust the system. They had better communications and more realistic expectations. Repair stopped being a ritual of regret and became a process of relationship strengthening. Apologies matter, don't get me wrong. It's always important to acknowledge that we're wrong. But part of this is, in 12-step programs, they call it an amends, right? An apology is an acknowledgement that you've broken down the fence between you and another person or overstepped a boundary. An amends is repairing that fence or boundary. And an amends, in essence, says, not only am I sorry, but I see why I did what I did. I know the need that drove that. In the future, I'll find other ways to meet that need, and I will continue to honor this boundary, this agreement, this trust that we have. And should it come up that I get too close to it, or another need competes with it, I will articulate it to you first, rather than just trample over it, because I'm cognizant now of this boundary. Now, really many couples don't do this. Many couples live in a system of failure that we call betrayal. And that is the next episode. So stay tuned for the next episode. And please, the only way that we know that we're making an impact through this podcast and video blog is when you like, subscribe, and share. So please like, subscribe, and share. And contact me, rich@richinrelationships.com, or comment on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Let us know that you're out there, that we're making a difference in the world, because that's why I do this, to make a difference in the world. In the meantime, have an amazing day and a fantastic tomorrow.